There is an 18-mile stretch of highway in southwestern Colorado that the state has never been able to make safe, not for lack of trying, not for lack of money. The mountains simply will not allow it. The road climbs to over 11,000 feet, clings to cliff faces with no guardrail between your tires and a several hundred-foot drop, passes through some of the most active avalanche terrain in North America, and has earned a nickname that tells you everything you need to know about the people who built it. They called it the $1,000,000 Highway. The joke, and there is a joke, is that the name refers to what it would cost you to drive it again. The geography of consequence. Start with the geography, because the geography is the whole story. The San Juan Mountains in southwestern Colorado are not like other mountain ranges in the American West. The Rockies further north are dramatic, yes. The Sierra Nevada in California is gorgeous, yes. But the San Juans are something else. They are older, more compressed, more vertical. They are a volcanic field that erupted catastrophically over millions of years and then got shoved upward by tectonic forces until the peaks reached 14,000 feet and the valleys dropped away in angles that make civil engineers go quiet and stare at their shoes. The range covers about 12,000 square miles in the southwestern corner of Colorado. It contains more 14,000-foot peaks, what Coloradans call 14ers, than any comparable area in the continental United States. It receives more snow than almost anywhere in the lower 48. The town of Silverton, which sits at the northern end of the most dangerous section of Route 550, averages around 380 inches of snowfall per year. That is over 30 feet of snow per year. In a town where people live year-round, on purpose. The highway itself runs from Montrose in the north to Durango in the south, about 117 miles total. Most of it is perfectly reasonable mountain driving. Scenic, winding, the kind of road that shows up in travel magazines with photographs of aspens turning gold in October. And then you hit Ouray. Ouray is a small town of about 1,000 people, tucked so deeply into a box canyon that it has no natural exit to the north, south, or west. The only way out is straight up. The town sits at 7,700 feet. The road immediately south of town, the section that everyone means when they talk about Route 550, climbs from that elevation to over 11,000 feet in roughly 7 miles. It does this along cliff faces so narrow and so exposed that when two vehicles meet going opposite directions, one of them sometimes has to back up to find a wide spot. This section of the highway is called the $1,000,000 Highway. It runs from Ouray south through Red Mountain Pass and down into Silverton. 18 miles. It has killed people every decade since it was paved. It will kill people in the next decade. The mountains are not particularly interested in your travel plans. Here is what makes it different from other dangerous roads. Most dangerous roads are dangerous because of driver error or poor weather or inadequate signage. 550 is dangerous because of what the terrain is. The shelf road sections, and there are several, are cut into cliff faces where there is no room for a shoulder, no room for a guardrail on the outer edge, and in some places, no room for a mistake. The road is 2 lanes in the sense that there are 2 directions of travel. It is not 2 lanes in the sense that you might understand 2 lanes on a road you have driven before. At certain points, you are looking at asphalt that is barely wide enough for a modern pickup truck, with a solid rock wall on your left and nothing on your right except air, and several hundred feet below, a river that does not care about you at all. The Uncompahgre River runs through the canyon below. It is named from the Ute word meaning something like hot water spring or dirty water, depending on which linguist you ask. What it looks like from the shelf road above, it is very small and very far down. That is the thing about exposure at altitude. The scale is wrong in a way your body knows before your brain does. How a road gets built where no road should exist. Now, a road does not appear on a cliff face by accident. Someone had to want something badly enough to put it there. In the 1870s, the San Juan Mountains were producing silver and gold in quantities that made otherwise sensible people lose their minds entirely. Mining camps appeared at elevations where human beings have no business spending the winter. Silverton, named for its silver deposits, was incorporated in 1876. Ouray, named after the Ute chief who had watched Anglo-Americans arrive in his homeland and correctly predicted how that was going to go, was founded the same year. Both towns were producing ore. The problem was getting that ore out. The nearest railroad connection was 100 miles away across terrain that had, up to that point, successfully discouraged every attempt at road building. The ore went out by mule, which worked in the sense that mules are stubborn and competent and do not complain, but which was not exactly a scalable logistics solution for a mining boom. Enter Otto Mears. Mears was a Russian-born Jewish immigrant who had come to Colorado after the Civil War and proceeded to build, over the next several decades, more than 450 miles of toll roads through the most difficult mountain terrain in the state. He was 5 feet tall. He paid the Ute people for right-of-way in some cases and took land by other means in others, a complicated history that the historical plaques along the highway do not always fully engage with. He was called the Pathfinder of the San Juans, which was either a tribute to his engineering instincts or a polite way of saying he went places where reasonable people had refused to go. In 1883, Mears completed a toll road connecting Ouray and Silverton through what is now the $1 Million Highway corridor. He blasted ledges into cliff faces using black powder. He built wooden retaining walls on the outer edges of shelf sections. He did all of this with hand tools, pack animals, and workers who were paid almost nothing to do work that was actively trying to kill them. The road he built was 12 feet wide in places. 12 feet. For reference, a modern lane of highway is about 12 feet wide. Mears built the whole road that wide, one direction of travel. The idea of a vehicle going the other direction was, at that point in history, not really the problem. Horses and mules understood the terrain in a way that, as it turned out, automobiles did not. When automobiles arrived, and they arrived in Colorado with tremendous enthusiasm because Americans in the 1910s and 20s were newly in love with the car and apparently believed it could go anywhere a horse could go, the road became something different. It became a test. Early motorists drove the Ouray-Silverton route as a kind of accomplishment, the way people climb mountains. Not because it was practical, but because it was there and because surviving it meant something. The state of Colorado recognized fairly quickly that a 12-foot toll road hacked out of a cliff face by a 5-foot Russian immigrant with black powder was not a long-term infrastructure solution. Between 1920 and 1924, the state rebuilt and widened the road significantly. In 1924, it was designated as U.S. Route 550. The toll gates came down, the mountains did not get smaller. The nickname. Now we have to talk about the name, because 3 different people will give you 3 different explanations for why this section of highway is called the $1 Million Highway, and all 3 of them are plausible and none of them are confirmed. And the whole situation is extremely on brand for a road with this much personality. Theory 1. The original construction cost $1 million. This was an extraordinary sum for road building in the early 1900s. The terrain required blasting, retaining walls, constant maintenance against rockfall and washout, and repeated reconstruction after avalanche damage. $1 million for 18 miles of shelf road in the mountains is not implausible. Colorado highway records from the period are not particularly precise on the matter. Theory 2. The fill dirt used in the road's construction contained low-grade gold and silver ore. The ore was not rich enough to mine profitably, but it was ore nonetheless. According to this version of the story, $1 million worth of precious metal is literally buried in the road surface. This is the version that gets repeated most enthusiastically by tour operators in Ouray, which should perhaps make you slightly suspicious. Theory 3. A woman named Evelyn Walsh McLean, who was the daughter of a Colorado mining millionaire and later the owner of the Hope Diamond, was once driven over the road and said she would not do it again for $1 million. That last one is the most fun. It is also probably apocryphal, but it is the version that contains the deepest truth about the road, which is that the relevant question is not what the road cost to build. The relevant question is what it costs you psychologically to drive it. That is a number different people will calculate differently, and for some people, it is in fact very high. There is a 4th explanation that locals offer with a completely straight face. They say the name comes from the fact that when they were building the road, a highway engineer looked at the finished shelf section with no guardrail on the outside edge and said it would cost $1 million to make him drive it. I cannot verify this. I choose to believe it. The road in winter. Winter on this road is its own subject, and it deserves to be treated seriously. The avalanche danger on the $1 Million Highway is not incidental. It is structural. The San Juan Mountains receive the snowpack they receive, the terrain drops at the angles it drops, and the result is that the corridor between Ouray and Silverton contains some of the most consistently active avalanche terrain in North America. There are over 30 identified avalanche paths that cross the highway in this section. 30. Some of them are large enough to deposit debris fields 30 feet deep across the road. Some of them move fast enough that by the time you hear the sound, it is too late to do anything about the information. The Colorado Department of Transportation manages avalanche mitigation on this corridor with what is, when you think about it, an absolutely extraordinary set of tools. They close the road. They use explosives to trigger controlled slides before the snowpack becomes dangerously unstable. They station observers in the mountains to monitor conditions. They deploy a World War II-era artillery piece, a recoilless rifle, to fire shells into specific slopes to knock snow loose in a controlled way. Let me repeat that. The state of Colorado manages a public highway with artillery. They shoot at the mountains regularly, on purpose, because the alternative is that the mountains shoot at the highway on their own schedule, which is less predictable and more inconvenient for everyone involved. The road closes multiple times every winter, sometimes for hours, sometimes for days. The closures are not optional, and they are not suggestions. When CDOT closes the $1 Million Highway, the towns at either end, Ouray and Silverton, become isolated. There is no alternate route. You wait, or you were already on the right side of the closure when it happened. And if you were not, that is your problem now. Silverton, remember, sits at 9,200 feet and averages over 30 feet of snowfall per year. The people who live there are aware that they live in a place that is periodically cut off from the outside world. This is not an accident. They chose it. Colorado mountain people are a specific type of human being, and I mean that with complete respect and only mild confusion. The deadliest avalanche in the highway's modern history came on February 28, 1970, when a massive slide came off Red Mountain and struck a snowplow operator named Ty Wyatt. He survived. Others over the decades have not. The slides that crossed this road have killed motorists who had no warning, workers who knew the risk, and at least one person who stopped to look at a previous slide's debris field, which is the kind of decision that is completely understandable and also exactly wrong. The avalanche paths have names: Riverside, Lookout, The Mother, Canyon Creek. They are named the way rivers and mountain features get named, by the people who live near them and have to reckon with them constantly. The Mother is called the Mother because it is the largest and the oldest and the most reliably dangerous, which is either a tribute to the concept of motherhood or a dark joke about it, depending on your perspective. The crash that changed everything. On the morning of February 8, 1992, a Durango area transportation bus was northbound on Route 550, carrying 12 passengers from Durango toward Ouray. It was winter. The road was the road. Near Panorama Point, which is one of the most exposed sections of the entire corridor, a point where the shelf road is carved directly into the cliff face and the drop to the river below is essentially vertical, the driver lost control. The bus went through the outer edge of the road and fell approximately 350 feet into the canyon below. 7 people died. 5 survived. The driver, Buddy Mahoney, was among the dead. The investigation that followed examined the bus's mechanical condition, the road surface, the weather conditions that morning, the driver's experience and training, and the engineering of the road itself at Panorama Point. What it found was not a single catastrophic failure. What it found was a margin. The margin that exists between a bus successfully navigating that section of road and a bus not navigating it is narrow in a way that the investigation had to quantify and found difficult to quantify. The road at Panorama Point does not offer second chances. It is the kind of road where the first mistake is the last one. The crash produced significant pressure on the Colorado Department of Transportation to address the safety conditions on the highway. Improvements were made, turnouts were widened, signage was improved, guardrails were added in certain sections, and here's the thing about those improvements: they were real, and they mattered, and they helped. And the road is still what it is. You cannot guardrail a cliff face into a safe road. At some point, the terrain is the terrain, and the road on top of it is the road, and the gap between what drivers expect and what the road provides is still there, still waiting. The Panorama Point crash is the moment that most directly forced a public reckoning with what this road actually is. Not a scenic byway with a dramatic nickname. A road where the engineering tolerances are tight enough that a bus with 12 people on board can go off a cliff on an ordinary Tuesday morning in February, and the investigation afterward cannot identify a single moment where something could have been prevented with certainty. That is a specific and troubling finding. It means the road itself is part of the answer to the question of what happened. The people who drive it every day. Here is something the travel articles do not tell you. The people who drive Route 550 every day, the commuters between Array and Silverton, the mine workers, the truckers hauling supplies to isolated communities, the highway maintenance crews who go out in conditions that would keep any sensible person at home, those people do not experience the road the way tourists experience it. They experience it the way you experience your own neighborhood. Known, mapped, understood. They have driven every curve at every time of year, in every weather condition. They know which sections are worst in a particular kind of storm. They know how the road behaves when it has been recently sanded versus when the sand has blown off. They know when to slow down before the sign tells them to. This knowledge is not written down anywhere. It is accumulated through repetition in a way that no amount of reading about the road can replicate. Locals look at tourists driving the million-dollar highway and recognize them immediately. Not by the out-of-state plates, though that helps. By the speed. Tourists drive too slow on the straight sections and too fast into the curves because they are managing fear rather than driving the road. Locals drive at a pace that the road suggests, which is a different thing. The truckers who service Silverton are in their own category. Driving a loaded truck over Red Mountain Pass in winter on a road with no guardrail and active avalanche terrain is a level of professional commitment that most occupations do not require. They do it because the town needs supplies and the road is the road. Several of them have told interviewers over the years that the most dangerous moment is not the steepest section or the most exposed section. It is the moment when a tourist car coming the opposite direction panics and stops in the middle of the road. A stopped car on a shelf road section with no shoulder creates a situation that requires extremely precise backing on the part of the truck driver in a vehicle that is 40 feet long on a road where the outside edge is a cliff. That is the situation that ends careers. Or worse. The unwritten rules are specific. You do not stop on the shelf sections except in an emergency. You honk before blind curves. You pull as far right as the road allows when you see a vehicle coming toward you on a narrow section. You do not look at the view while you are actively driving the exposed sections. You look at the view when you have stopped at one of the pullouts, which exist precisely so that you can look at the view. The view, for what it is worth, is extraordinary. The San Juans in any season are as beautiful as mountains get. The road would attract tourists even if it were perfectly safe because the landscape it passes through is that good. The danger is not the draw. The danger is the price of admission to the landscape. The road today. Today, Route 550 between Array and Silverton is a state-maintained two-lane highway, a national scenic byway, and one of the most photographed road segments in Colorado. The Colorado Department of Transportation will tell you accurately that the road is safer than it has ever been. Retaining walls reinforced, blind curves improved, an avalanche mitigation program that is among the most sophisticated in the country, better maintenance than anything this corridor saw in 1970 or 1980 or 1992. All of that is true, and the road will never be fundamentally different from what it is. There is nowhere to put a wider road. The cliff face does not have room for additional lanes. The canyon does not have room for a bypass. The idea of an entirely new alignment, a route that avoids the shelf sections and the avalanche paths and the exposed traverses above the Uncompahgre, would require engineering work of a scale and cost that no Colorado highway budget is going to support for a corridor serving a combined population of roughly 2,000 people at either end. The math does not work. The terrain does not negotiate. Route 550 between Array and Silverton will be, for as long as anyone reading this is alive, a two-lane shelf road on the edge of a cliff in avalanche country. That is not a failure of will or funding, that is geology. What happens when you cannot change a dangerous thing is that you build an economy around it. You can book a guided Jeep tour of the $1 Million Highway. You can hire a professional driver to take you over Red Mountain Pass while you sit in the passenger seat and look at the scenery without your hands gripping anything. Ouray has a visitors center. The gift shops sell t-shirts. One popular design renders the road's curves in silhouette, with text referencing the experience of having survived it, which is a perfectly reasonable souvenir for a road that has not been survived by everyone who drove it. Nobody puts that part on the shirt. Every January, the Ouray Ice Park fills with climbers from around the world. The park is built in the box canyon below the road's most dramatic section, a place where the county pipes water onto the canyon walls through the winter and lets it freeze into climbing routes. People fly to Colorado specifically to climb frozen waterfalls inside a canyon that you access by driving the $1 Million Highway to get there. The local economy runs partly on that combination, the ice and the road, and the particular type of person drawn to both. Adventure tourism operates on the logic that danger makes an experience worth having. It is not a logic that survives too much scrutiny. But in practice, standing at the edge of the Ouray Ice Park with the canyon walls rising around you and the highway above threading along the cliff face, it is not wrong either. The road is the attraction. It always has been. The mountains just never agreed to make it easy. Let me tell you what this road actually is, underneath the nickname and the history and the crash reports and the artillery. Route 550 between Ouray and Silverton is a document. It records every decision that was made about what mattered in southwestern Colorado going back to the 1870s. It records the decision that silver and gold were worth reaching no matter the terrain. It records Otto Mears' decision that a road could exist where roads had no business existing. It records the state of Colorado's decision that the road was worth maintaining even after people died on it, even after a bus fell into a canyon, even after every winter proved again that the mountains were not finished negotiating the terms. Every road is built on a decision about what matters enough to connect. Most roads connect towns that were placed in sensible locations. Route 550 connects towns that were placed in the mountains by people who were not primarily thinking about sensible. They were thinking about silver. They were thinking about beauty. They were thinking about the peculiar human conviction that a place that is difficult to reach is worth reaching precisely because it is difficult. The $1 Million Highway is not famous because it is the most dangerous road in America. There are logging roads in the Pacific Northwest and mining tracts in Alaska that are objectively more dangerous by any measurable standard. It is famous because it is dangerous in a way you can experience on a Tuesday afternoon in a rental car, look over the edge, and feel in your chest before your brain has processed the information. It makes the danger available. It puts you on the cliff face without requiring you to be a specialist. That is a specific kind of road. There are not many of them. The San Juan Mountains were here before the road, and they will be here after it. The volcanic rock that Otto Mears blasted with black powder in 1883 is the same rock that the asphalt sits on today. The snow accumulates at the same rates it always has. The avalanche paths follow the same terrain they always have. The river at the bottom of the canyon is still small and still far down and still does not care about you at all. What the road does, what it has always done, is make the landscape legible to people who arrive by car rather than by mule or on foot. It compresses the experience of the San Juans into a drive that most people can complete in about 45 minutes, if they do not stop for the view, which they will, because the view is that good. The sign at the southern entrance to the $1 Million Highway section, coming north out of Silverton, does not say that the road ahead is dangerous. It says that the road has no guardrails on certain sections and that large vehicles should use caution. This is technically accurate the way that saying the Grand Canyon is a large hole in the ground is technically accurate. It captures the facts without capturing the experience. The experience is the Shelf Road section above the Uncompahgre River, where you look right and there is no rail and no shoulder and no second chance. The experience is Red Mountain Pass at 11,078 feet in a late season storm when the visibility is 50 feet and the road markings are buried and you are making decisions based on where you think the edge probably is. The experience is coming around a blind curve and finding a loaded truck in the other lane and understanding in the half second before everything resolves that there is not quite enough room. Most of the time, there is enough room. Most of the time, the truck fits, the curve is navigable, the pass is crossable, and you arrive in Ouray or Silverton with a story and a slightly elevated heart rate and the particular feeling of having done a thing that required your complete attention for 45 minutes. Otto Mears is buried in Washington, D.C., which is an interesting choice for a man who spent his life in the Colorado mountains. There is a stained glass portrait of him in the Colorado State Capitol building in Denver. He is depicted in full Victorian dress, looking prosperous and confident, which is accurate to the record. He does not look like a man who blasted shelf roads out of cliff faces with black powder using crews of workers on terrain that wanted to kill them all. He looks like a banker. The road looks like a road. Until it doesn't. That is the whole lesson. The terrain is what it is. The road sits on top of it. The mountains were not consulted about any of this, and they have been expressing their opinion ever since. Everything else follows from there.